You are not on my level anymore. Your sister understands ambition. Lydia built his empire while she stayed home. But when he replaced her with her own sister, what happened next will restore your faith in justice. Lydia met Stephen when they were both starting their careers in the same marketing firm. She was sharp, creative, and respected. Stephen admired her drive. They married young, and for the first 3 years, they climbed together. Lydia brought in major clients. Stephen handled operations. People called them a power couple. Then Stephen's mother fell seriously ill. The medical bills arrived faster than they could prepare. Stephen's father had passed years earlier, so the responsibility fell entirely on him. Lydia watched her husband break under the weight. He stopped sleeping well. He forgot meetings. One evening, as he sat at the edge of their bed with his head in his hands and whispered, "I cannot do this alone anymore." Lydia moved closer and held his shoulder. "You are not alone," she said quietly. "We will carry this together." Stephen looked up, his eyes red. "The company is struggling. My mother needs surgery. I do not know how to balance everything." Lydia did not respond immediately. She thought carefully. Then she spoke with certainty. "Let me step back from my career. You focus on growing the business. I will handle your mother and the home. When things stabilize, I will return." Stephen shook his head. "Lydia, you have worked too hard. I cannot ask you to sacrifice that." She placed her hand over his. "You are not asking. I am choosing. This is what marriage means." And so Lydia resigned from the firm she loved. She moved Stephen's mother into their home and cared for her daily. She cooked, cleaned, gave medications, and sat beside the woman during long hospital visits. Stephen poured all his energy into the business. Slowly, it began to grow. As you continue watching the story, I want you to tell me where you are watching from in the comments. Lydia's days became a cycle of caregiving and housework. She woke early to prepare breakfast for Stephen before he left for the office. Then she bathed his mother, Agnes, fed her, and made sure she took her medication on time. In the afternoons, Lydia cleaned the house and prepared dinner. By evening, she was exhausted, but she never complained. Stephen noticed her effort at first. He used to thank her. He kissed her forehead and said, "I see everything you are doing. I will never forget this." But as months passed and the business began booming, Stephen's gratitude faded. He came home later. He spoke less. When Lydia asked about his day, he responded with short, tired answers. One night, Lydia mentioned casually that she had been thinking about returning to work part-time. Stephen looked up from his phone with irritation. "Lydia, my mother still needs care. You cannot just abandon her now." Lydia blinked, surprised by his tone. "I am not abandoning anyone. I thought maybe we could hire help so I can ease back into..." Stephen cut her off. "We will talk about it later. I have a meeting in the morning." He stood up and walked into the bedroom, leaving Lydia sitting alone in the living room. That was the first time Lydia felt invisible in her own marriage. Lydia's younger sister, Kemi, visited often. Kemi was bold, fashionable, and always chasing the next opportunity. She had recently lost her job and spent her days complaining about how hard life had become. Lydia, out of love and pity, allowed Kemi to stay with them for a few weeks. "Just until you find something stable," Lydia told her. Kemi smiled sweetly. "Thank you, sister. You always come through for me." At first, Kemi helped around the house. She assisted Lydia with their mother-in-law and even cooked occasionally. But soon, Kemi began dressing up in the mornings and sitting in the living room whenever Stephen was home. She laughed louder at his jokes. She asked him about business strategies and listened with exaggerated interest. Lydia noticed but dismissed it. She told herself Kemi was just trying to learn. She told herself Stephen would never cross that line. But Stephen did. It started with small conversations that stretched too long, then it became private phone calls. One afternoon, Lydia walked into the living room and found Kemi sitting too close to Stephen on the couch. They both looked up quickly, faces slightly guilty. "We were just talking about a job opportunity," Kemi said smoothly. Lydia nodded slowly, her stomach tightening. That night, she confronted Stephen. "I do not feel comfortable with how much time you spend with Kemi," she said carefully. Stephen's face hardened. "Lydia, are you accusing me of something?" She hesitated. "No, I just think we need boundaries." Stephen stood up, visibly annoyed. "Your sister is jobless and struggling. I am trying to help her. But if you want to be jealous and insecure, that is your problem." Lydia felt the words hit her like stones, as she did not respond. She turned away and went to bed, her chest heavy with doubt. Weeks later, Stephen announced he was hiring Kemi to work at his company. Lydia's heart sank. "Stephen, that is not wise," she said. "Why?" he challenged. "Because she is my sister, and I know her. She is not reliable." Stephen's eyes turned cold. "Or maybe you just cannot stand to see her succeed while you are stuck at home." The statesman crushed Lydia. She stared at him, unable to speak. Stephen grabbed his briefcase and left for work without another word. Lydia began noticing changes she could not ignore. Stephen came home smelling of perfume that was not hers. He password protected his phone. He attended business dinners and did not invite her. Kemi stopped helping around the house entirely. She left early in the morning with Stephen and returned late, laughing loudly as they walked through the door together. One evening, Agnes, weak but still sharp, called Lydia to her bedside. "My daughter," the old woman said quietly, "be careful. That girl is not your friend." Lydia's throat tightened. "Mama, what do you mean?" The old woman held her hand. "I see the way she looks at your husband, and I see the way he looks back." Lydia wanted to deny it, but deep inside she already knew. The confirmation came 2 months later. Lydia woke up one night and realized Stephen had not come home. She called his phone repeatedly. No answer. At 3 a.m., she heard the front door open. She walked into the living room and found Stephen and Kemi standing together, frozen. Kemi's lipstick was smudged. Stephen's shirt was untucked. The silence between them was louder than any confession. Lydia's voice came out steady, but broken. "How long?" Stephen exhaled slowly, almost relieved to be caught. "Lydia, I did not plan this." Kemi looked away, pretending shame she did not feel. Lydia's hands began shaking. "How long, Stephen?" He met her eyes with a coldness she had never seen before. "Does it matter? You and I have not been husband and wife for a long time. You became a caretaker, not a partner." Lydia felt her knees weaken. "I gave up everything for you," she whispered. "I left my career. I took care of your mother. I held this home together while you built your success." Stephen shrugged. "And I appreciate that. But appreciation is not love. Kemi understands my world. She is ambitious. She pushes me forward. You just stayed behind." Lydia looked at her sister, searching for remorse. Kemi finally spoke, but her voice defensive. "Sister, I did not mean to hurt you, but you cannot blame me for connecting with someone who sees my value." Lydia's chest felt like it was being torn apart. She walked past both of them without another word, went into the bedroom and locked the door. She did not cry immediately. She sat on the floor, staring at the wall, her mind blank. Hours later, when the sun began rising, the tears finally came. For 3 days, Lydia barely ate. She moved through the house like a ghost. Stephen did not apologize. Instead, he moved his things into the guest room. Kemi packed her belongings and left quietly, but Lydia knew she had not gone far. Then one morning, Stephen stood in the doorway and said the words that shattered her completely. Lydia, I want a divorce. She looked up at him from where she sat beside his mother's bed. Ocha, your mother is still sick, she said quietly. Stephen shifted uncomfortably. I have made arrangements. We will hire a nurse. Lydia's voice remained calm, but her hand trembled. And what about me? What happens to me after I gave you my best years? Stephen looked away. You will be fine. You are strong. You always survive. Then he walked out. Lydia finally broke. She collapsed beside the bed, sobbing so hard her body shook. Agnes, too weak to move, reached out and touched her hair. My son is a fool, the old woman whispered. But God is not blind. Lydia stayed on the floor for a long time. She felt like her life had ended. But deep down, something small and stubborn refused to die. It was the part of her that once built empires, and it was waking up. Lydia did not fight Stephen in court. She signed the divorce papers quietly and took nothing but her personal belongings. She left the house she had maintained, the mother-in-law she had cared for, and the man she had sacrificed everything for. She moved into a small one-room apartment on the other side of town. For weeks, she lived in silence, eating little and sleeping less. One afternoon, her former colleague Stella found her. Stella worked at a growing tech startup and had always admired Lydia's marketing skills. I heard what happened, Stella said gently, and I came to offer you something. Lydia looked up, hollow-eyed. I do not think I have anything left to offer anyone. Stella sat down beside her. You do. You just forgot. Come work with me. Start again. Rebuild. Lydia wanted to refuse, but she had no other options. Slowly she nodded. Okay. I will try. And so Lydia returned to work. At first, her hand shook during presentations. Her confidence was gone. But Stella stood by her, encouraging her, reminding her of who she used to be. Gradually, Lydia began remembering. She started landing clients again. She rebuilt her portfolio. She worked late nights, not out of desperation, but out of purpose. Within a year, Lydia had become the startup's lead strategist. Within 2 years, she co-owned the company. Her name reappeared in industry circles. People who once pitied her now respected her again. She moved into a better apartment. She traveled for work. She rebuilt her life piece by piece, and this time, she built it for herself. Meanwhile, Stephen and Kemi's relationship crumbled fast. Kemi had no real interest in hard work. She wanted the lifestyle, not the labor. She spent money recklessly. She demanded attention Stephen could not always give. They fought constantly. One evening, Stephen came home and found Kemi packing her things. Where are you going? He asked, confused. Kemi turned to him, annoyed. I am done. You are boring. This life is boring. Stephen stared at her, stunned. I left my wife for you. Kemi laughed bitterly. And I left my sister for you. We are both terrible people, but at least I am honest about it. She walked out, leaving Stephen standing alone in the house that suddenly felt too big and too empty. Stephen tried calling Lydia a month later. She did not answer. He sent messages. She blocked him. Finally, he went to her old workplace, only to discover she no longer worked there. He asked around and eventually learned she had become a partner at a successful tech firm. Desperate and broken, Stephen tracked down a new office address. He waited outside one evening until he saw her walking toward her car. She looked different. Her posture was strong. Her clothes were elegant. Her face was calm. Lydia, he called out. She stopped and turned slowly. When she saw him, her expression did not change. Stephen. He walked closer, his voice shaking. I made a mistake. I was blind. I threw away the best thing I ever had. Lydia looked at him for a long moment, then spoke quietly but firmly. Yes, you did. Stephen's eyes filled with tears. Please, give me another chance. I know I do not deserve it. But Lydia raised her hand, stopping him. Stephen, I gave you my career. I gave you my time. I gave you my loyalty. And you repaid me with betrayal. I will not give you my future. Stephen stepped forward desperately. Lydia, I am begging you. She did not move. I begged you once too. I begged you to see me, to value me, to remember what I sacrificed. You called me a caretaker, not a partner. You were right. I was taking care of a man who did not deserve it. Stephen broke down. I am sorry. Please. Lydia opened her car door. I forgive you, Stephen, but I will never return to you. Some doors, once closed, should stay that way. She got into her car and drove away, leaving Stephen standing in the parking lot, finally understanding the weight of what he had lost. If this story moved you, know that sacrifice rooted in love is never wasted, even when it is betrayed. The people who undervalue you will one day search for you and find only your absence. What lesson stood out to you most in Lydia's story? Was it her strength to rebuild, or Stephen's regret when it was too late? If stories like this speak to you, you are welcome here. Subscribe to Heritage Folktales Stories for more African stories, where truth always finds its voice and the underestimated always rise. Thank you for watching.